If you've been paying somewhat attention, you might have noticed that a certain someone from a certain party recently did a thing.
But them's the breaks.
Recently, Boris Johnson resigned, kind of, as Prime Minister, and currently there is a leadership contest to decide who will be the next Conservative Party leader, but also who will be the next Prime Minister by default. The fact that however many members there are of the Conservative Party get to decide who the next Prime Minister is a little bit funny, but we're going to brush past that, and we're going to explore the 5 candidates who are still in the running. As of right now, when I'm recording, about 40 minutes before the first live leadership debate. Currently, there are 5 people in the running, and on Wednesday of next week, there will be the second round where MPs will vote, and if a candidate doesn't get above 30 supporters, they drop out of the race. It whittles down to however many are left, and then it gets put to the party members, and it's all a fun time. So I thought, look, a lot of people in this race aren't super well known. So I thought it'd be nice to give a little quick rundown of who they are, where they'll kind of stand, and how they are angling themselves to try and become Prime Minister. But obviously, this is the channel. This is my channel. I would never just do this in a normal way. So I will be doing this through the means of alcohol. I'm currently drinking a beer. It is a beer Moretti. It's very nice. So, inspired by my drink of choice for the night, I will be explaining and helping us all understand who these potential leaders are by comparing them to a specific beer. It's weird, I know, it always is around here, so let's just dive in and go straight ahead onwards. So I'm going to talk about each candidate in order of how many supporters they have at this moment in time, starting from the least and going up to the highest. So currently, the last place out of the 5 is a fella called Tom Tugendhat. He is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee and has an overall focus on foreign policy. Part of this as well from the fact that he was a former soldier who is aiming to project a sense of calming unity. A lot of the time he's spoken about the need for a clean start or the need for the party not to be divided, and is angling himself very much in contrast to what Boris Johnson was and represented. I would say out of the 5, he is the most of a sort of a look back before the Johnsonism and sort of the muddying of British politics, and angles himself to be a uniting force that can bring the party together so that the public will support them. Also, interestingly enough, a very interesting statistic is that he, at least very recently, had the most support from Tory MPs who are in the Red Wall. I mean, Ben Walker will get mad at me just for saying it, but the Red Wall is a political concept which basically meant that all of these former Labour Party seats in sort of the north and generally more like deprived areas or more working class areas, which flipped to the Conservatives in 2019, largely for various different reasons, be it Boris Johnson, be it Brexit, and a lot of other things. So Tom Tugendhat actually has the most support from Tory MPs who currently reside in Red Wall seats. So that is an interesting dynamic because those are the seats that are going to be crucial come the next election. How much that will actually play into a factor in the election is probably not huge. However, these are the seats that are very important, and if it is the case that the MPs liking Tom Tugendhat will translate to the constituents liking Tom Tugendhat, then he could be a pretty valuable political asset come the next election. Generally, in terms of his leadership, I think people seem to think that he is kind of angling for just a very good committee position. I mean, I mentioned his history on foreign policy. I think the natural assumption is that he probably just wants to be foreign secretary, but who knows? I've sort of said a couple times in the past that I could see him sort of going for the Theresa May route of just sort of staying alive for as long as possible and hoping that the other candidates just snipe each other out until he's the only one left, pretty much, which isn't a terrible plan. So more importantly, what kind of beer would Tugendhat be? So he's angling himself as a refreshing, clean start. So I'd actually go for maybe a dry Asahi. It is not from the UK. His foreign policy experience. The idea of it is it's quite neat, it's very clean, it's quite refreshing beer, which plays into the fact that he is trying to angle himself as a breath of fresh air. Next up is Kemi Badenoch. I'm actually not sure how to say her last name. Badenoch. I'm not sure on that, but I'm just gonna say Badenoch. She was the former Levelling Up and Equalities Minister. However, her track record in that role is quite a strange one. I think she's definitely a big anti-woke kind of candidate. I think she is the string of the modern Conservative Party, which is trying to play off of the GOP strategy of targeting the sort of culture war issues. She got some notoriety recently at her one of her events, where there were gender-neutral bathrooms that her campaign had stuck on signs that said men's and women's to like separate them. Ridiculous culture war nonsense. You know, she's very vocal on woke stuff and trans issues, and she is a concerning sign for the future of British politics. As for her, in terms of what kind of drink she'd be, she's definitely aiming for that controversial angle. You know, she's trying to fire up her own base, pissing off the other side to sort of motivate her way forward. So I think as a controversial sort of like, you know, I would say that the best way to describe her is she's not most people's cup of tea, and certainly not mine. However, she could appeal very strongly to a very specific kind of person. Potentially not a very good person, and potentially a sort of more reactionary wing of the Conservative Party membership. So I would describe her really as a tangy, very sour and fruity ale. One that really stands out to a lot of people, will turn most people off, but the specific kind of person who likes that sort of thing could really play well. Yeah, so not for me. Next up, who's currently in third, is Liz Truss. She's, I believe, currently Foreign Secretary. I don't think she resigned. She's currently Foreign Secretary, and she is most famous for her slightly creepy love of pork markets. Which, hey-ho, you know, each to their own. She's actually one of the few Tory candidates at this point who hasn't come out and actively, massively said about and supported tax cuts, which is a little bit interesting, a bit of a difference, but I would say when trying to describe her as an alcohol, I think she really models herself a lot off of Margaret Thatcher. There's a lot of photos, I can throw them up on screen now. She's trying to make herself look like the Queen, trying to make herself look like Margaret Thatcher. There's a real obsession with image and a sort of nostalgia baiting to the traditions of the British Conservative Party. I mean, it's nothing new for Tories to, you know, obsessively market themselves along the lines of Thatcher, but she's definitely pushing it a bit far. So I would describe her really as a Guinness, but specifically the original recipe one, which, you know, the idea of sort of nostalgia baiting, the kind of fake old-timey vibe, and it's just somehow worse and terrible. Hot take for Guinness Original. If you actually do like it, let me know in the comments. It's a bit weird, in my opinion, but the can looks nice. Also, I know Guinness is Irish and her whole thing is being super British. Whatever. Ignore it. It's fine. Now for the name, I think a lot of people are quite surprised to be in quite high contention, is Penny Mordaunt, or Mordaunt, I don't know, it's spelt weird. Penny Mordaunt, I'll say. She was the UK's first ever female defense secretary. Not for very long, but she was. She really isn't that famous in the party. I mean, personally, as someone who's very, you know, interested and involved in politics, I only found out who she was, you know, pretty much straight, like a couple of days before Boris's resignation. She really hasn't made much of a splash in the Conservative Party. Speaking of splashes, she's actually most well known for going on the ITV diving show, The Splash. Interesting enough, I guess you got to make a profile somehow. I mean, Nadine Dorries was on I'm a Celeb, and she definitely exists as a person, so, you know, each to their own. Penny Mordaunt's strategy so far has definitely seemed to be one of kind of laying low, you know, trying to just fly under the radar straight into number 10. There's been very few appearances, very little output in general, and even less policy positions. I think she's kind of just going for the vibe of a prime minister, you know what I mean? And hoping that will sort of just coast her through. In the same way that, you know, I mentioned that Tom Tugendhat's best path to number 10 would likely be just to hide underground until the shelling stops and he's the only one left. This does seem to be the way that Penny Mordaunt's going, a lot like Theresa May, like I mentioned. The thing is, it's quite hard to describe her because we just don't really know that much about her. I mean, she was very pro-Brexit. She was very, very Brexity and continues to be this day. I think overall I'd probably describe her as a Bud Light. You know, people kind of see it floating around occasionally. It's been around for a while, but just kind of in the background. No one really enjoys it that much, but no one really hates it that much. And as is in the name, it's very light on substance, character, and anything else you could possibly want in a leader. And finally, the front runner currently and the only candidate who anyone's actually heard of, mostly in a bad way, Rishi Sunak. Sunak, husband of a billionaire, a very, very wealthy man. I think in like the top 200 wealthiest people in the UK or something, if you count his wife's fortune, which is exciting, especially when you consider the whole non-dom thing. Apparently, there's been rumblings that Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, his office would actually quite like Rishi Sunak to win, because it's a bit of an easy he's a bit of an easy attack right now. There's a cost of living crisis, and he, meanwhile, his wife doesn't really pay proper taxes, allegedly, and he himself is incredibly wealthy and does come across as very out of touch. He seems to be pitching himself as, a very serious person, a safe pair of hands, and someone who is reliable and detail-oriented. However, in the recent online debate between the leaders, there was a slight error in his background, which I think might have slightly harmed his reputation in that way. Isn't irony a beautiful thing? He does come across as a man who is obsessed with image, both in his attempt to be seen as, serious and prime ministerial, but also his attempts to hide how tall he is, or I should say short, rather. Google it. It's quite stunning. They do a great job of hiding it. You'd really think he's tall. At least I always did. And Rishi Sunak's time as foreign secretary and as a politician is very interesting. I mean, he was very, very popular during the pandemic with the furlough, and with Eat Out to Help Out and all of that stuff. However, his political trajectory has declined so steeply that I think Alton Towers are very jealous. Right now, whilst he is the most, or if the only known candidate to the general public, it's not for good reasons. He's very unpopular. People find him a bit out of touch, it seems, and it might be a bit tricky to see if he does become Prime Minister and does become leader of the Conservative Party, how that will play with the general public. In terms of what alcohol he is, I'd probably say that he is like a small can of Heineken. Imagine this, but green. He's well known, not particularly loved, or even liked, to be honest. Just not the most exciting person in general, but potentially bland enough to sort of ride his way into victory, become a staple of, your average pub. No one really gets too emotional either way. That is my quick little rundown of the Tory party candidates. It's nice to do another political video, actually. It's been a while since I've delved back into the world. If any of my choices in terms of alcohol has driven you crazy, just let me know in the comments. Just shout below. If you want me to do some more coverage of the Tory election as it goes on, please also let me know. I might consider doing a bit of a stream around it, maybe streaming one of the debates. I think it'd be good fun. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I have been Dutiful Future, and let's see what happens.